had said that, as for him, he's done everything right, and we should blame it on Ken Ofori-Atta and Dr. Bawumia for asking him to write government debt of about 48 billion off. So it tells you that even without the write-off, the actions of the governor and his inactions has actually collapsed the central bank ahead of the domestic debt exchange.
And Dr. Mama, the signs don't look good. I know that you've well sharpened your teeth. You want to come and defend this, but it doesn't look good.
All right, so good morning to you again, my brother Walker, and to my senior brother, the incoming PhD. Mohammed Mutala.
He's in his final leg of his PhD defense.
Okay. And also good morning to the people of Tamanov. I think I'll be in Tamanov tomorrow to support a brother who will be filing his nomination form
for the NDC.
Abdul Rahman for the MP.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we will want to unseat the Honorable Suhini with Alidu Abdul Rahman.
Abdul Rahman. Alidu Abdul Rahman wants to unseat Al Hassan Suhini.
They can daydream, you know.
So I think it is going to be held tomorrow, 9 a.m. in Tamal. So I'll be joining them. Walk up. You see, when we have a problem, and the problem has been highlighted, one is to proffer explanation. If the explanation suffices, the general public would come along with you.
Please let me be right in there. Since you're a PhD holder, you said first is explanation. Second is what?
If the explanation suffices, then they will come along with you. If the explanation is not adequate, if the explanation you provide is not convincing, then the action the public would have expected you to take in order either to ameliorate the situation or to even get back and another person will come and manage it is the other option. Now, the NDC minority in Parliament probably is not even willing to listen to the explanation. And their only suggestion is that the governor of the Bank of Ghana should resign with the 21 days ultimatum given. You see, I find that to be premature because this is not the first time the central bank has recorded losses in its books. Okay, when in 2016 the bank recorded losses, no one called for the head of the governor then. No one asked the governor then, even though he might have existed, to be surcharged against the losses. When you are running an economy, you are expected that, just like a company, every year you may not post profits. So when in 2022, the central bank recorded losses, one would genuinely ask, what accounted for these losses? And you were right in your introductory part, highlighting some of the reasons why the central bank recorded losses. Now, the whole issue of central bank and being the lender of last resort, being the banker's bank, and being the anchor of the economy, the monetary anchor of the economy, and also coming in to support government in terms of crisis is not in doubt. That is the primary role of central banks, not just the Ghanaian central bank, the Federal Reserves, the Fed of the United States, in the Central Bank of England. All of these come in to intervene whenever government having shortfalls in revenue, government is facing liquidity challenge, government is finding it difficult to meet its obligation when they fall due. This is the primary role of central bank. And even when they record profit, it's supposed to be transferred to the central government for the purpose of running the economy. Now, a central government in the course of the year has encountered enormous challenges, physical challenge, liquidity issues, at a point that we had to call for those we hold their instrument to make some forfeiture. Forfeiture to the extent that they must forfeit some part of their interest, and in some cases, principal. The first victim will be your central bank. It doesn't make moral sense. It doesn't make economic sense. It doesn't make what they call equity sense for you to go after other investors. When your own has investment, you are holding instrument belonging to the central bank. And
the difficulty is that even if you look at the Bank of Ghana Act itself, it's not supposed to have given more than a certain percentage beyond the previous year's declared revenue. So the breach of the regulations themselves is untenable. It's another situation. As a development economy, you should know this.
Yeah, so Look, there are different views about central bank financing of central government. They are different, they are varied, and economists are not consensus at idiom on that. Okay, there's no consensus of mine on how much central banks should. But for Ghana, we have a regulative regime, a legal framework which says that central bank should not lend about 5%, more than 5% of the previous.
Is there no good reason behind this law?
There are good reasons. And those
so
are
if it's flouted, then somebody's head should roll. If the call is made.
Construction of the law, in the framing of those laws, there are always provisions made for force majeures. Okay.
You are saying that if a government is performing badly, there should be coup d'etat to throw
I
the
am
constitution.
saying that in the construction,
so that the head of state
in
goes.
the framing and in the drafting of the law, there are provisions made for force majeures. Okay. And that there are situations that you will contemplate. I don't know, the law is not mechanical. The law is supposed to be flexible and dynamic and address contemporary needs.
That's
and
what they
also
call a spirit and letter of the law.
Exactly, and adapt to the circumstances you find yourself. So if central bank, for instance, at the end of a month, you have revenue far lesser than your expenditure, workers have to be paid. Where do you expect the central bank to go, the central government to go to? The first point of resort is the central bank.
If that is okay, why did we even put the law in there in the first place?
The law is supposed to regulate. And when it is regulating your activity, it gets to a point that you will have to also make room. For instance, let me just give a simple analogy. For instance, I have a law to regulate how my household expenses are made. But it happens that I did not budget for a child getting sick of malaria. Is that to suggest that because I did not budget for the child being sick of malaria and my expenditure is capped at, say, 50,000 a month, I should not increase it to 55,000 to cater for the child who is sick of malaria? It doesn't make sense. Okay.
When you cannot take care of it?
I said that it doesn't make sense. Even if the man's borrowing.
It doesn't make sense, but when you cannot take care of it, in a precarious situation, you still allow it to go?
Then, Walker, you would then have to go and borrow in order to do that. Because you cannot jeopardize, you cannot jettison, you cannot compromise the health of your child because you think you don't have money. If it demands borrowing to do that, that is the first responsibility of a parent to a child. Okay? So that is the situation the central bank found itself. If 50% of the principal of the working capital, of their equity, is being shaved off, okay, you then expect nothing but a loss being posted by the central bank.
Let's just give ourselves a reminder. You remember Isaac Adongo, the one who speaks on the state of the economy from 2019, 2020, 2021, up to 2022, had been given the signs and warnings, which apparently he said were on the wall. Of course, after we play this instead of him, we'll also come back and then also get a swift rebuttal back in November from the central bank about this excessive on-lending or borrowing to the government of Ghana, being the central government. Let's take a recall.
And no matter how you shout, your minister only 2 days ago borrowed at 29.8%, and you are saying that people are taking interest at 23%, when your minister is borrowing at 29.8%, only yesterday. And when he was looking for 4.9 billion, he got only 1.1. The minister, as he's sitting here, he's confused as to how he get the money to pay them their money. And you're talking 1.1. So you are not even aware of what is happening in your economy. Mr. Speaker, I heard somebody say that the Bank of Ghana is giving overdraft and that the Bank of Ghana is not printing money. Why? Is the Bank of Ghana a deposit-taking institution? Is the Bank of Ghana raising money through deposit? The Bank of Ghana is obviously printing money and throwing a government. But what is worse is that, Mr. Speaker, the Bank of Ghana Act makes it illegal for it to give money to government beyond 5% of the previous year's revenue.
Petroleum product 2 years ago could deliver a liter of petrol at 4 cedis 50 pesos. So essentially now the problem is not even about the taxes, it's about the exchange rate. And who is supposed to manage the exchange rate? It is the governor of the central bank, Dr. Addison. Another big problem we have now is inflation. And the Bank of Ghana manages the inflation targeting framework, whilst the Ghana Statistical Service reports actual inflation that has occurred. That was supposed to meet in order to exit. In other words, Ghana entered a classroom to write an exam. We were supposed to write the exams in 3 years. In 3 years' time, we said we're not ready. We were given another 1 year to come and write the exam. We still said we're not ready. Then we wrote to the IMF to say that we want you to give us a waiver for non-observance of performance criteria. And the IMF says, go and say no more. Today, we are dealing with 22 billion Ghana cedis, an expansion of 63% in the public sector. Mr. Speaker, on the average, we are adding 21% to our public wage bill every year. Mr. Speaker, if this continues, by the year 2020, we will have doubled our wage bill that we left in 2016. Mr. Speaker, that is the height of indiscipline. That is the height of indiscipline. And yet, the finance minister says he is right-sizing government. How type of right-sizing is that you right-size to increase your wage bill by 63%? Mr. Speaker, that is a worrying sign for our country.
Now, you can see clearly, those seated alongside Isaac Adongo, you have the current General Secretary, Fifi Quid. So that was back in 2019. 2019, COVID had not hit. Russia had not gone to bomb Ukraine. Now, that speaks volumes about the warning signs that were on the wall prior to COVID. Also speaks volumes to whether the right decision was made to exit the IMF and whether the warning signs that, for example, Professor Lord Mensa, who is a regular on the show, had given that same year, 2019, that we could end up back at the IMF should be listened to. Now, let's take you through the act, and then I'll ask a question of Dr. Mahama. Now, in Section 30, as amended, of the BOG Act, the total loans, advances, purchases of treasury bills, etc., shall not at the time exceed 5% of the total revenue of the previous fiscal year. Now let's go to the next. What we have, based on its own report for 2022, viewers, is indicating we have these impairments of GOG security holdings from 2021. And then subsequent impairment of loans and advances granted at Quasar government, and also mounting to the amount you see on TV. In excess, we're having 6 billion in excess. The first one, 48 billion. If you remember, in June, or from March, April, May, June, Isaac Adongo, same person, had been warning that these advances, and he called them printing of money. He called the printing of money to the central bank was problematic, could reach levels which could impair the BOG, that is, take it to the ICU. Is that not what we've seen in, if you take a look at in 2023 now? The Bank of Ghana then decided to reply sharply, and I remember I read this on the show in November, that period. That was just last year. And it says the claims on government represent the stock of debts by the Bank of Ghana and reflect accumulated claims for, tacit explanations as to why we had all these on-lendings and what they call the printing of money jeopardizing the state of the bank. Dr. Mahama, your government just doesn't listen, does it?
You see, the fact is that the determination of whether the government listens or does not listen is not going to be measured because government has more or less set aside some fiscal responsibility or financial disciplinary interventions or measures. Okay, that's not the measure of government listening or not. I think that the real measure of a listening government is the measure the government takes in the midst of crisis to save the people.
That's your estimation?
That's my estimation. And if you listen to the German Chancellor, okay, he mentioned on the back of the global program that I hope you people will not be listening to me, you will not be asking me what happened to debt to GDP, what happened to fiscal discipline at the end of this particular program. And essentially the situation we found ourselves. When we were in this crisis, no one was asking what would happen to your debt to GDP. No one was asking what will happen to your fiscal discipline. No one was asking what will happen to your physical constraints or impediments or you've put into governing your account. No one was asking. All what mattered was how do we save ourselves from the situation. Now we are almost out of the wood in terms of that pandemic. People will then begin to ask questions. So for me, the real measure of whether a government listens or not is not in the strict adherence to the laws, even when that particular compliance with the law is going to affect you in terms of the management, in terms of the health, in terms of the safety and protecting the vulnerable in society. So that is not the measure. I think that we must put everything in context and then ask the very tough decision, the very tough questions. Did government have the money to carry on with its mandate? The question is no. Why was government not able to have the money? That's the next question. And it's obviously the issue about the pandemic. I asked myself, if in 2019, this country grew by 6.5% in terms of GDP, the following year, our growth was only 0.5%. Now, what is the percentage reduction in growth? That is a 6 percentage point reduction in growth. Take the 6 percentage point by the size of the economy in 2017, which was around 67 billion. You are getting some amount of 4 billion reduction in growth. Okay? Government didn't borrow to that thing. It means that if we're even able to keep our pre-COVID growth level of 6%, obviously we will not be in this particular discussion of talking government wasn't able to, cater for his obligation. But government was not able to sustain the 2019 growth of 6.5%.
Because you were warned that the way you are going into the market borrowing at concessional rate, you'll be in trouble.
Borrowing
and then flats came.
Borrowing doesn't inhibit growth. Borrowing actually supports and spur growth.
Nobody has said that.
Okay. So if borrowing does not borrow, so they say that our growth reduced because we are borrowing is to misunderstand the issues. Okay, so when we bring the issue about borrowing, you borrow in order to support economic growth, right? So when you are borrowing and all of a sudden a catastrophe has happened and your growth has dipped, okay, you don't expect any government to sit aloof and not do anything about that. So what I just want to put on record is that, look, the central bank decision to give overdraft to the central government on the back of shortfalls in government revenue is part and in line with the normal mandate of the central bank to central government. And that argument that a section of the Financial Management Act or a section of the Central Bank, Section 30, as amended. But when we also go to read Section 46 of the same Act, it talks about emergency support, okay? Emergency support to the central government. So we must read the whole of the Act as in totality in order to appreciate the issue. For me, central government could have gone to BOG and even they reported. The law is that they should report to them through the finance minister. When Adongo and other members of parliament, my senior brother is here, the central minister went to parliament and explained. That may not suffice, but the explanation was provided. At the end of the day, losses are posted by the central bank. There are explanations, but I just want to note that the central bank will be coming with a full response to the issues raised by the minority in parliament.
And afterthoughts, and clearly, because this is based on their own reports. You just hold the horses there. But at the end of the day, we've come to some dire straits. The central bank is in a very wobbly situation because the warning signs were just not heeded to.
Good morning, Roland, and good morning to my brother. Unfortunately, he's on the path of defeating my sister for the Wale MPP primaries. I've been telling him not to contest, to allow my sister to contest, and he's bent on getting the woman out. We don't care as NDC, whoever comes. We are very convinced that
for the Wale seat.
Inshallah, we are very convinced that we are winning the Wale seat this time around. But you see, what Dr. Kabiru failed to add when he said, in response to your statement, that overborrowing doesn't affect growth. He failed to add that corruption affects growth. Plundering the resources of a state recklessly, as his boss, the vice president and the president are doing indeed affects growth. Stealing, outright robbery of people who are virtually criminals, masquerading as politicians, and unfortunately have had the opportunity to manage the resources of a country that affects growth.
How do you mean?
And I would explain that in a jiffy. Dr. Kabiru also said that this is not the first time the central bank has reported losses. Nobody says this is the first time. The issue is not just about the reporting of losses. The issues have to do with the outrageous spending, even in the eyes of the so-called losses that have been reported. And by the way, he said the central bank will respond comprehensively to the NDC. NDC hasn't said anything that is not captured in the annual report and the financial statement of the central bank. Every single thing, if you listen to the press briefing delivered by the minority leader, every single statement he made has a leg on what is being reported in the annual report and the financial statement of the central bank. So they are now trying, you see, the MPP is behaving like a child who is at his concrete operational stage of growth. That child blames everybody for his woes except himself. And that is why children at those ages, he can see you wearing a dress which is similar to that of the mother or the father, and then he'll be insisting that you should give the parent's dress to him or her. You have reported, and we are looking at what you have reported and using it as a basis to call for this man to resign or fired. And I know they will come desperately trying to defend. Dr. Kabiru, the issue is not just about the losses. We have gone to the IMF to borrow $3 billion. That is what we are begging the IMF to do. And for which reason this government is compromising on everything, including LGBTQ nonsense. We have gone to the IMF to borrow $3 billion. The Central Bank of Ghana reported a loss of over 60 billion Ghana cedis. That amounts to $6 billion. So it means that the monies we are looking for which reason we are compromising on all stands, getting ourselves involved in conflicts that have nothing to do with us as a state, because we want to please the Bretton Woods institutions and the countries who manage the Bretton Woods institutions. We have spent recklessly, monies that we would have gotten without even going to the IMF. Assuming we manage to prevent half of the $60 billion that has been reported by the central bank as a loss. 60 billion cedis that has been reported by the central bank as a loss. If we're able to prevent that loss just by half, we wouldn't have had any need to go to the IMF looking for money to borrow, because that 60 billion constitute about $6 billion, and the IMF is giving us $3 billion. I don't know whether they would even give us the money, taking into consideration the outright.
Well, they're giving
thievery.
it to us in tranches.
I'm saying that the tranches, I wonder whether it will come, because outright thievery, supervised by the Flagstaff House. You remember I told you on this program, to the displeasure of some of our colleagues in MPP, that the Flagstaff House has become the citadel for corruption. In all the justifications he has given, why we are where we are, he deliberately refused to mention corruption. When CDD, the Afrobarometer, Corruption Perception Index, everybody has identified this government to be the most corrupt in our history. If we had prevented that, I don't think we would have been where we are. And it is important for your viewing public to understand. Aside breaching the law, the Act 30 of the Central Bank law, every financial transaction by any institution in this country, Section 37 of the Banking Act as amended. Every conduct of any institution in this country, as long as the monies you are managing belongs to the state, you must respect the Public Financial Management Act. Now, he said that and if I just want to quote him very well, he said that the central bank lending, that there are different views on the issue of the central bank lending.
And its support. To a country, for example.
But there are no different laws as to what you should do, even when you are in that circumstance. Now, he said that under the prevailing circumstance, the central bank needed to do so. And he said that we should read the entire act. We should not stop at Section 30, We should go and read at section 45. Yes, we should read at section 45. But 48. If 48, we should read section 48. But
even the same 36.
I'm saying that even the same section 40, the same section 48 and the 36 says that before you do that, go to Parliament. Go to Parliament. Why didn't the Bank of Ghana, through the Minister of Finance, do what the law that you are quoting with alacrity and telling us that we should read that? Why didn't you do that? It is also significant that if you look at the entirety of the thievery which has occasioned some of this, the central bank has become virtually insolvent, bankrupt, 55.1 billion Ghana cedis as negative equity. Now, you also look at the amount of money that they spent. How would you write off debt of government as a result of your reckless borrowing? The reason why this government could no longer get money in the capital market is because they have overborrowed. And the only way they can do that is to rely on the central bank to print money.
Or the domestic market.
The domestic market. And 48 billion was what they wrote off. So tomorrow, like the ranking member said yesterday, NCC or the free zones or the Minister of Trade or the Minister of the Ghana Exim Bank or any other state institution, Ghana Water Company, ECG, they have decided to write off the debt that the state owes them. They do that with alacrity. 48.4 billion constitute almost half of government indebtedness to the central bank. Now, they also have about 131 million, which they spent on motor vehicular services. 131.6 million. Why? Do they have helicopters and planes that they use as the central bank? That maintenance of this one should constitute that whooping amount of money. 131
The Bank of Ghana says it includes purchase of fuel,
please. I mean, spare me that preposterous claim in an attempt to defend the outright thievery and robbery that the people of this country have been subjected to. They have 97.4 million on foreign and domestic travels. I mean, how ridiculous. 97.4 million in a year on foreign and domestic travels. Where is the bank, the central bank, even the governor himself, where does he go? What kind of domestic travels? 97, do you know what the 97.4 million can do? You need about 800,000 Ghana cedis to build a 6-classroom block. Those who are watching, let your producer divide the 97.4 by 800,000, and we see the number of 6-classroom blocks we built for this country. Students are still lying on their bellies. In Tamale Central, in the heart of Tamale, he knows. Kulkul School, he knows that school. I went to the school to make some donations. A teacher approached me and asked me just to go around the classes. I went to one of the classes. Children were lying on their bellies. And then you spend this amount of money on so-called foreign and domestic travels. 8.6 million Ghana cedis on directors' remunerations. Apart from the salaries and others, 8.6 million Ghana cedis. That 8.6 million Ghana cedis can change. In fact, it can take care of free SHS, I believe, within a year.
So you're saying they should have cut costs?
My niece went to school, spent 2 months, came home 3 months. She's still at home. Because facilities are not available to accommodate the team and the huge numbers of students in the secondary schools. That was why President Mahama felt that free SHS should be progressive. Let's provide the structures. Let's increase the facilities before we go in there. This reckless and incompetent government refused to do so because you had a candidate at that time, unfortunately, who is the president, who was so emotive, and everything he did was so egoistic that he made a promise. That promise ought to be fulfilled. It doesn't matter whether the promises he made sense or not. This is what I want to do, and therefore I won't take my time and think through it. And as a result of that, we have these challenges we are facing. That 8.6 million Ghana cedis could have taken care of the free SHS a year. But another one that will shock you, banking supervision, 357.9 million Ghana cedis. Look, Central Bank has regional offices across the country. The responsibility or the mandate of officers there is to facilitate or to help to ensure that this supervision is done. Within Accra, if you say that you are even going to be doing it in Accra, is it fuel that constituted...
Have you had the response of the Bank of Ghana?
What response did they
Because within the period, they had to intensify some of these banking supervision activities.
Why? Were they supervising all the banks across the continent of Africa? I guess that's what they were doing. I guess there was an additional responsibility. Nigeria sought the assistance of the Central Bank of Ghana to supervise all their banks in Nigeria. How ridiculous. 357.9 million. But look at another one. Computers. 67.9 million Ghana citizens. Yeah, did they purchase new computers? Why? Elon Musk gave them some computers that you don't need a structure, that you just sit down out of nowhere, you are using the computers. You are a journalist, a seasoned journalist. You have been in practice for a very long time. 32 million Ghana cedis on communication. 32 million Ghana cedis. I want to ask my brother Kabiru whether it makes sense to him that they will plunder our resources, spend this amount of money in communication. When he made that analysis, he said, oh, you're looking at the circumstances because of the COVID and the challenges. Tomorrow they will tell us that the death of the Queen of England has occasioned this. Ghana was not the only country that was hit by COVID. And I don't know how many times we have to state here that other countries which economies were not doing better than Ghana. COVID hit all of us. Those countries, people died less as compared to the number of people who died in Ghana. They borrowed less. Burkina Faso borrowed 20 million in the name of COVID. We borrowed $3 billion in the name of COVID. Over $300 million from the World Bank in the name of COVID. Got over 300 million grant from the European Union in the name of COVID. Dip our filthy hands into the Bank of Ghana to remove money for the purposes of what only God knows. Then you come and then you tell me that because of the pressure that was exerted on the people of this country, that was the reason. But let me tell you what will shock you. Now, Kabiru, he said that assuming that you have budgeted for your family and your child, unfortunately, got malaria, you won't say that because you've budgeted this amount of money, you won't take care of that. That is a perfect analogy. And since this morning on this program is devoted to analogies, let me permit you to also bring out another analogy. Kabiru, you have gone home and your kids' school fees haven't been paid. Then you decided to go to Tamale or to Wale Wale to buy the best of smokes, as you are wearing one. To wear. When you have other smokes, but you decided to buy the best of smokes, you decided to go to Nigeria to buy the best of cheddar so that you can look nice when your children's school fees haven't been paid. If you do that, you are stupid.
He says that you can go to the bank
I'm saying
and
that if
then
you
break your bank.
I say if you do that, your children's school fees.
Go into your savings.
I'm saying that if your children's school fees haven't been paid, and you decided to spend money on luxuries, you decided to spend this amount of money on communication, 32 million. You decided to spend on the remunerations of employees, 8.6 million. You decided to spend $250 million to build another headquarters or another office. $250 million. In the eyes of all these challenges, it looks as if they are telling us to tighten our belts. Yet they have gone to the Bank of Ghana and the Flagstaff House, and the president has authorized that all of you rip off your belt hooks, so that if you don't have belt hooks, people will not even ask you to tighten your belt. How can you tell me that because of the challenges confronting us as a result of COVID and those things they have been telling us, outright nonsense, that they tell us in our faces that the reason why we are going through these challenges is because there's a global challenge that is hitting everybody. Yet, you are so luxurious enough to spend $250 million to put up another office. Can't you avoid that? Maintain this because of the prevailing circumstances, that when you get out of the woods, then you can be thinking of providing another office, even if you so need that office. That is illogical. And that is the point we are making, that the Central Bank reported losses in the past. But the difference between the past losses, one, apart from the quantum of losses, two, the jump in increased. If you juxtapose, I realized my brother was using big English. Juxtapose. In fact, I even lost that. I wanted to be writing. Now, if you look at the losses incurred by the previous, center, including this one, look at the increases in expenditure. Juxtaposing these increases against last year. Last year, when we were so depressed as a country, granted without admitting
You mean the year before 2021?
Yes, granted without admitting that all our problems are occasioned by COVID and others. Granted. The reason why this government has to do that is because the Minister for Finance, who, by the way, is only a Minister for Finance because he uses Oforiata. If he wasn't using Oforiata, with his incompetence, the recklessness, and the mess he has created, this man will not spend a month.
You're not the appointing
please,
authority.
I said this is the only minister. He was outside the country.
You are not
he was
the
not
appointing
well.
authority.
The ministry was waiting for him.
The president reserves the right.
And I deserve the right to make my comments. Don't I?
Of course you do.
The democratic space is open to everybody. The only reason why this minister is the Minister for Finance is because he uses Oforiata. And that's why I've been telling the other MPP guys. If you want to get appointment, go swear affidavit, add Oforiata to your name. I'm even considering. No, I haven't finished.
No, please.
Let me conclude. Let me conclude. He is an economist. No, it's important.
No, you are a development planner as well.
No, I say it's important that I conclude.
Dr. Mahama,
it's important I conclude on this.
There are key issues.